Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm really so glad you're here with us right now.
It is truly a privilege to share this space with you today.
Yeah, and we're going to be stepping into a space today that feels honestly incredibly personal and maybe a little vulnerable.
It is a heavy topic, but a really necessary one.
Totally. We're exploring this deeply relatable but, rarely discussed topic of how our own sense of morality, our conscience, can actually secretly become a psychological prison.
A cage we build for ourselves.
Right. So if you are listening to this right now and you've ever felt just completely overwhelmed by the pressure to be perfect in today's demanding world.
Or if you've ever lain awake at, say, 2 in the morning.
Oh, the 2 a.m. spiral, yes.
Yeah.
Just replaying every tiny perceived mistake you made that day, this deep dive is absolutely for you.
It really is.
Today, we're pulling from a fascinating stack of sources, specifically some excerpts from a piece that explores Buddhist psychology and what they call the dark side of morality.
Such a striking phrase.
It is. And our mission today is to decode why we punish ourselves in the name of being good. We'll look at how our ego actually hijacks our conscience. And most importantly, we're going to find a practical, ancient way out of this exhausting mental loop.
And just to set the stage for where we're heading, the journey we're embarking on today is not about abandoning our morals.
Right, we're not saying just go be a terrible person.
Exactly. It's not about lowering our standards for how we treat the people around us. Rather, it's about understanding the deep, structural difference between having a healthy, compassionate awareness and falling into an endless cycle of self-punishment.
Because we carry so much heaviness in our hearts, don't we?
We do. And we often trick ourselves into believing that this heaviness somehow makes us better people.
Like the suffering is the point.
Right. But as we'll discover in these sources, the goal isn't to silence the voice of your conscience. It's to learn how to listen to it differently, so it can actually guide you rather than imprison you.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because there is a metaphor right at the beginning of these sources that just stopped me in my tracks.
The mirror.
Yes, the mirror. The text asks us to imagine a young child standing before a mirror. But they aren't looking in the glass to admire themselves or, playfully make faces.
They are actively searching for flaws.
Which is so heartbreaking. Think about that for a second. They've been told their whole life that they must be good. Always kind, always helpful, always quiet when the adults are speaking.
So they watch themselves with pure, unfiltered judgment.
Every tiny misstep, every unspoken thought, or just a flicker of normal human anger or jealousy, it suddenly becomes a crack in their moral armor.
And over time, that mirror doesn't reflect a face anymore.
It transforms into a courtroom. And inside that courtroom, the child sits as both the accused and the judge. That is it's such a haunting image of how our conscience shifts from being a helpful compass into a rigid cage.
It really is a haunting image, and it describes a psychological shift that almost all of us go through as we grow up. In the early light of our awareness, before all the heavy conditioning of society takes hold, our conscience is actually a beautiful gift. It essentially functions like a physical reflex.
Like touching something hot.
Exactly. You know how you instinctively pull your hand back from a hot stove? Originally, your conscience works the exact same way. It simply whispers to you, do no harm.
It's not yelling at you.
No, it just stirs a natural, gentle discomfort when we accidentally hurt someone. It is the echo of our human interdependence.
It's just trying to keep us connected to each other.
Precisely. And in Buddhist psychology, this inherent sensitivity is not viewed as a weakness or a flaw to be managed.
Right, the sources introduce this fascinating concept, hijacks.
Yes, hijacks. This translates to the twin guardians of moral shame and moral dread.
Which sounds so intense in English.
That translation sounds very heavy. But the crucial thing to understand conceptually is that originally, these are not punishments. They are protectors. They arise from a place of profound care, not from fear or self-loathing. They are just a gentle, internal reminder that you are connected to the world and your actions matter.
That feels so light and natural when you explain it like that, but then the turning point happens.
The ego enters.
Yes. The moment the ego enters the room, everything gets incredibly heavy because our ego absolutely hates uncertainty.
It craves definition.
It craves safety, and
Right.
most of all, it craves control. So it takes that delicate, beautiful inner compass you just described, and it turns it into a strict, unyielding rule book.
It's a survival mechanism.
Right. It's like the ego says, hey, the world is terrifying, but if I can just perfectly execute this moral checklist, nothing bad will happen to me. I will be loved. I will be worthy.
And suddenly, our conscience becomes a performance based on past conditioning.
Whether that's your family's expectations, cultural norms, or today the impossible ideals we are constantly fed on social media.
And the voice that used to just gently say, "Be kind," suddenly hisses at you. You failed. Again. And this brings us to what I think is one of the most tragic illusions the ego creates. It convinces us that the heavier our burden of guilt is, the purer our soul must be.
We mistakenly believe that if we're suffering under the weight of our own conscience, if we're agonizing over our flaws, it's undeniable proof of our virtue.
But the sources are very clear on this. This isn't purity at all. It is spiritual inflation disguised as humility.
Wait, hold on. Spiritual inflation disguised as humility. That is such a wild concept.
It turns everything upside down.
Let's linger on that for a second because that is completely counterintuitive to how most of us are raised. We think beating ourselves up means we are staying humble.
It is entirely counterintuitive. But think about what's actually happening. When you are constantly beating yourself up, who is the center of your universe in that moment?
I am. You are.
Yes, you are. The ego mistakes self-punishment for righteousness. It confuses its own pain with genuine moral progress.
It's as if we are building walls around that childhood mirror we talked about, brick by brick, guilt by guilt.
Constructing a prison cell that we truly believe we deserve to sit inside.
But inside that cell, we aren't actually helping anyone else. We are just obsessed with our own perceived badness.
Exactly.
That completely flips the script. And reading through these sources, there was this staggering historical story that grounds this idea perfectly. The story of Devadatta.
The Buddha's cousin?
Right, the Buddha's cousin. According to the text, Devadatta sought purity through extreme, harsh asceticism. We are talking severe physical and mental deprivation.
Starving himself, sleeping on beds of nails.
Denying himself every basic comfort, he truly believed that being incredibly harsh toward himself and demanding the exact same from others was the only real path to being pure and holy.
But the Buddha offered him such a gentle, brilliant correction.
Using the analogy of a lute string.
Ah, the lute string analogy. It is a masterpiece of mindful psychology.
It really is. If you listening right now have ever played a guitar or any stringed instrument, you know exactly how this works.
A string pulled too tight will simply snap under the pressure.
Right. But a string left too loose won't produce any sound at all.
The mind requires balance. When our conscience is over-tightened by the ego's demands for perfection, it doesn't magically produce profound wisdom or hypermorality.
It just produces silence.
The terrible, hollow silence of total exhaustion.
The silence of someone who has completely stopped trusting their own heart.
And if we look at how this ancient dynamic plays out in our modern lives today, we see this over-tightened string in countless everyday forms.
Oh, everywhere.
Think of the parent who is severely sleep-deprived, utterly overwhelmed by the demands of work and family, and in a moment of sheer human frailty, they snap and lose their patience with their child.
And afterward, they just cannot forgive themselves.
They spiral into a dark place of self-loathing.
Or think of the caregiver who pours every ounce of their physical and emotional energy into helping an ailing family member until they are entirely empty.
And then they feel crushing guilt just for needing to take a nap.
In each of these cases, the conscience is no longer serving its original purpose of connection. It's enforcing separation.
It divides the person into two warring factions: the idealized good me and the unacceptable bad me.
Yes. And because the ego desperately wants to identify only with the good me, it feels like it constantly has to suppress or hide or punish the bad me.
But the Buddhist psychology outlined in our sources offers this incredibly comforting, paradigm-shifting reframe.
There is no inherently bad me.
Exactly. We freeze ourselves in time based on our worst mistake.
The sources actually have a fascinating term for this trap, sakaya dihi.
Yeah.
From what I understand, it essentially means viewing yourself as a fixed, permanent thing. So when a stressed parent snaps, it isn't because they have a fixed identity as a bad parent.
It's because temporary conditions like stress, fatigue, and unmet needs have clouded their awareness in that specific moment.
That is a perfect explanation.
The tradition refers to those temporary clouds as avijja, which means ignorance or a lack of clear seeing, and tanha, which is craving or clinging.
Okay.
The action itself might have been unskillful, it might have caused harm, and we absolutely take responsibility for that, but the person is not the action.
Right.
The person is a fluid, changing ecosystem.
So it's the difference between saying, I did a bad thing because I was exhausted versus I'm a bad person.
Exactly. That distinction is the key to unlocking the prison door.
Wow.
The way out requires a fundamental shift in our internal dialogue. Instead of asking the rigid binary question, am I good or bad? Which only feeds the ego's trap. We must learn to ask, what conditions gave rise to this moment?
We move away from asking how to punish ourselves into being better.
And instead ask how we can respond to the messy reality of the moment with kindness, both to others and to ourselves.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because this brings us to the paradox of goodness and how our suffering actually masquerades as virtue.
It's very clever disguised.
Very. The sources describe how the ego is sitting quietly in the corner of our mind, dressed up in the robes of humility, constantly whispering, "You should have done better. You aren't doing enough."
It looks like morality from the outside, but the hidden motive is entirely about control.
Control?
You see, the ego is not a mustache-twirling villain. It is simply a psychological process. It's a dynamic constellation of thoughts and memories, just trying to maintain a coherent identity so you feel safe.
Right.
And feeling good or righteous is one of its most seductive survival strategies. It desperately needs to feel morally superior to insulate itself from the terrifying, unpredictable chaos of being human.
But the paradox is that the harder the ego clings to being the good one, the more it suffers.
Because life is inherently messy.
Let's face it, even our purest intentions will sometimes misfire. And when the messy reality of life clashes with our ego's picture-perfect image of our own morality, our brain basically short-circuits.
And instead of softening into true humility and admitting we are just flawed humans doing our best, the ego doubles down.
It tightens the moral leash,
leading to righteous defensiveness and an even thicker prison wall.
That is a wonderful distillation of the mechanics of suffering. And it perfectly sets up another profound story from the sources. The story of Anathapika.
Yes.
Oh, I loved this part. I was reading through this section and it just broke my heart. Anathapika was one of the Buddha's most devoted and generous disciples.
A true pillar of the community.
The text describes how he used to give away massive amounts of wealth, building monasteries, feeding the poor, constantly supporting everyone. He was the golden standard of a good person.
But then a severe financial crisis hit.
And he lost almost all of his wealth. Suddenly, he couldn't give the way he used to. He could only offer very meager, basic food.
And the text says he felt so deeply ashamed of his new poverty that he couldn't even bring himself to physically face the Buddha.
He avoided him completely because he felt completely unworthy.
His entire sense of self-worth was tied to his ability to perform goodness.
Exactly. But the Buddha sought him out. And his lesson to Anathapika was so beautiful. He essentially told him that true giving, true dana, is about the freedom and the intention of the heart, not the amount of gold changing hands.
Anathapika's ego had quietly hijacked his genuine generosity and turned it into a rigid transactional condition for his own self-worth.
If I provide, I am good. If I cannot provide, I am nothing.
It is a trap so easily fallen into, especially today. We see it constantly in the modern perfectionism of those who care deeply about the state of the world.
Think, for instance, of a modern social justice advocate, or someone trying to be deeply conscious of the environment.
Exactly.
And just a quick note to you listening, we aren't taking a stance on any specific politics or activism here. We're looking purely at the tremendous psychological burden this creates on the individual, exactly as described in the text.
It's about the internal dynamic.
I mean, think about it. You're in the grocery store aisle having an absolute existential crisis over which bag of coffee or almonds is the most ethically sourced.
You want to do the right thing, but it's paralyzing.
That is a perfect, relatable example. That person burns with an incredibly beautiful, genuine compassion for the world.
Yet internally, they might judge themselves incredibly harshly for any minor misstep.
They might feel crushing guilt for buying the wrong coffee, or for taking a weekend off to rest.
Or even for simply enjoying a warm, peaceful meal while knowing that others out there are suffering.
The inner voice tells them, you are complicit, you aren't doing enough.
It sounds like a deeply moral, elevated stance, but it is actually an unbearable psychological weight.
What's fascinating here is that the sources argue this dynamic is not true morality at all.
No, it is spiritual perfectionism.
The ego has equated purity with relentless, flawless action, and any deviation becomes evidence of a fundamental moral failure.
Which brings us to this incredible analogy in the text about how we handle these feelings.
The riverbank analogy, I love this so much.
It's very vivid.
Imagine you are standing on the bank of a river. The water is incredibly turbulent, it's rushing by, filled with heavy logs, debris, and swirling, dangerous currents.
When we fight our emotions, when we try to force our conscience to be perfectly clean.
It's like we are jumping straight into that raging river, trying to manually clear the heavy logs and debris with our bare hands.
It's exhausting, and frankly, it's impossible.
You're just going to drown. But the practice of mindfulness, which the text calls satya, invites you to simply stand on the bank.
You don't jump in.
You just watch the river of your emotions flow by.
That visual is so powerful. And the shift in perspective it requires is revolutionary. It is the heart of what the tradition calls vipassana, or insight meditation.
Okay.
Instead of fusing with the emotion and telling yourself, I am a guilty person, you stand on the bank and simply note, guilt is present in this moment.
But wait, I have to push back on this a little, just playing devil's advocate for the listener.
Please do.
If I just stand on the bank and watch my guilt or my shame float by like a log, isn't there a huge risk that I just stop caring altogether?
That's a very common fear.
Like, how do we avoid just becoming completely apathetic and saying, oh, well, I made a mistake, guilt is present, moving on?
That is a vital question. And it is the most common fear people have when they first encounter this practice. Standing on the bank does not mean you don't care about the debris in the water.
Right.
It means you recognize that you cannot effectively clean the river while you are drowning in it.
Wow.
When you say guilt is present, you still feel it in your chest. You observe the stories of unworthiness it whispers. You don't ignore the harm you may have caused.
Which you don't jump in.
You do not judge the emotion itself, and you do not let it define your entire identity. In that spaciousness, the emotion loses its power to paralyze you.
It becomes just a passing wave.
Not the entire ocean. You cannot heal guilt by trying to force yourself to be more good. You heal it by allowing yourself to be more human.
Which actually frees up your energy to make genuine amends. Precisely.
That makes so much sense. You have to get out of the water to actually see clearly how to help.
Yes.
So what does this all mean for us as we try to navigate our daily lives? The author of these excerpts asks a question toward the end that feels so pivotal.
What is the question?
They ask, what if the final fetter, the very last chain holding us back from true inner freedom, isn't something obvious like anger or greed or lust, but our desperate, exhausting need to be good?
This raises an important question, doesn't it? We often imagine enlightenment or deep inner peace as the complete eradication of all negative feelings.
We think we'll just float on a cloud of perpetual serenity.
But the truth is that every mental state, even the ones we label as toxic, like guilt or shame, contains a profound seed of wisdom.
They are echoes of our deepest humanity.
Guilt points directly to our capacity for care. Shame reveals our profound, vulnerable longing for connection. Regret shows our genuine recognition of harm.
The issue is never the emotion itself. No. The issue is the ego's agonizing story wrapped around it. The story that says, I am fundamentally broken and I must endlessly atone.
And when we drop that specific story, conscience stops being an executioner.
It turns back into a mirror.
And a mirror doesn't condemn you, it doesn't yell at you for having bedhead.
It simply reflects what is there.
When our conscience is freed from the grip of the ego, it stops acting like a judge pounding a gavel in a courtroom. It becomes a clear, quiet mirror.
Allowing our natural ethics to emerge from within us organically.
Rather than feeling like a crushing set of rules imposed from above.
Exactly. And this brings us to a profound modern paradox that the sources highlight. We live in an era of unprecedented moral awareness.
We really do. We are constantly tracking our carbon footprints. We're actively acknowledging our social privileges.
And we are seeing the raw suffering of the world in real time, 24/7. On the glowing rectangles in our pockets.
Yet, collectively, we are drowning in moral exhaustion.
Why? Because we care deeply, but we do so without self-inclusion boundaries.
We have turned our conscience into a global surveillance system, but we've trained the cameras entirely inward.
Aggressively scanning our own souls for any deviation from perfection.
It's so true. We are utterly exhausted because we intentionally leave ourselves out of our own circle of compassion.
It's a tragic omission.
There is this beautiful quote from the Buddha in the text that speaks right to this, and it almost brings tears to my eyes. He said, "You can search the entire world for someone more deserving of your love and care than yourself, and you will not find them."
Such profound wisdom.
Including yourself in your own compassion isn't selfish, it's a structural necessity. The sources use the analogy of a lamp.
You cannot possibly light the lamps of others. You cannot be a force for good in your family or your community if your own flame has been completely extinguished by constant self-reproach.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Self-compassion is the absolute, non-negotiable foundation of any true compassion for the world.
Mindfulness asks us to feel the weight of our care, but to refuse to let it crush us.
To clearly acknowledge our mistakes, but to never let them define our entire worth.
The messy emotions we run from, guilt, shame, regret, are not obstacles on your path to freedom. They're the gatekeepers.
They are holding the keys to a much deeper, more authentic connection with yourself and the world around you.
So how do we actually practice this?
Right. What is the practical alchemy here for the listener? According to the sources, it happens in tiny, almost invisible micro moments throughout your day.
It's the moment you make a mistake at work.
Or you snap at your partner, and instead of immediately spiraling into a dark pit of shame, you just stop.
You place a hand gently on your heart.
You take a deep breath, and you literally say to yourself, "This is hard, and I am still worthy."
It's the moment you notice that harsh inner critic rising up to yell at you about the ethically sourced coffee.
And instead of fighting it, you simply say, "Thank you for trying to protect me, but I'm safe right now."
That is the beautiful alchemy of awareness. You aren't trying to magically change or banish the difficult emotions. You are simply changing your relationship to them.
You are actively befriending your conscience.
It is no longer a tyrant recording your daily sins, but a quiet, steady hum beneath the noise, reminding you that you belong to this world.
And when you finally realize that the heavy shadow of conscience was never yours to carry in the first place, the prison door simply swings open.
You recognize that you are not here to be flawless, you are here to be awake.
You are not here to be flawless, you are here to be awake. I love that so much. To summarize the core revelation of our deep dive into these sources today, liberation doesn't come when you finally achieve some impossible state of moral perfection.
Liberation comes when you stop needing to prove your goodness to the mirror.
And you start holding your own messy, beautiful humanity with tenderness.
And to you listening right now, remember this. The prison door is already open. The reflection in the mirror is clear.
You can step forward today, right in this moment.
Not as the idealized, perfect person your ego desperately thinks you should be, but as the complex, vulnerable, entirely human being you already are.
That is, and always has been, enough. Before we go, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to carry with you. We've talked today about how our greatest wounds might actually be the exact sites of our liberation.
Yes.
But let's take that a step further into your daily life today. What if the very flaws and failures you judge most harshly in yourself are actually the secret ingredients to your deepest empathy?
A powerful question.
What if fully accepting the so-called bad parts of yourself is the absolute only way you can ever truly forgive the people around you? Think about that the next time you catch yourself looking in the mirror. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us today. We really hope you carry this profound self-compassion into the rest of your week. Take care.